Jeremy TV.
Welcome back to the channel. Jeremy here. I'm back in the northeast corner of the place where I started clearing for the winter project. And I just wanted to give you a quick recap from the last video. You might remember we got a lot of this stuff done. I made a lot more progress than I expected in the amount of time that I worked on it. So I got some stuff pushed back here. I got all the way through the outside edge there. Got that old tree cut down. It's dry. I need to, a little drier than it was. I need to drag it off if I can. Still pretty wet over by the brush pile though, so I don't know. At some point I need to push my way that way, and that might involve cutting some of these small trees down, which will allow me to get more of the briars. But I think today what I'm going to work on is this area right up here on the west edge of this corner. It's going to probably involve cutting down some of those vines that are growing to the ground and just backing the brush hog in and just chopping stuff up. Some of the bigger trees I'll have to cut with a chainsaw, and some of the smaller ones I'm just going to bowl them over with the brush hog. That big beech tree that's laid over right there, it's pretty rotten down at the bottom. I'm surprised it ever even grows, but it still greens every year. But it's kind of a hazard, and I'm going to have to cut it down at some point, but I'm going to have to get this stuff cleared out first so I can get to it, and then that'll be part of the project as well. The rest of that beech tree is right here, and it's leaned over pretty good, and it looks like it's kind of rotten at the base, so I don't know what to expect with it. Maybe that I'd be best off cutting the whole thing down instead of trying to work around it. Just don't know. But today I want to focus on this stuff kind of in here, this undergrowth, and cutting down any trees that need to be cut down. So I got to the big beech tree that's laying down much earlier than I expected. The brush hog made pretty short work of this stuff that was up in this corner, and again, I'm stepping foot in a place I've never walked before, so I'm glad to see it cleaned up. But I'm gonna have to start cutting that into small pieces with the chainsaw and dragging them out one at a time, because that's a very dense wood unless it's really rotten, and I don't think it can be terribly rotten because it still greens every year, so I don't know what to expect. But I've never tried to cut beech before. Getting ready to start trying right now. Alright, so I went in there to start cutting that last piece somewhere up around that corner, and it's so rotten it just fell over. I saw it moving before I'd even cut on it, and I guess it's just rotten down there in that bin. So I'm going to hook the chain up to it and see if I can drag it out of there as is. And then I think I'll be able to get up in there. I'm going to stand on the bucket of the tractor and start cutting that thing from the other end and see if I can't get the rest of this thing down. Alright, so that was pretty rotten, and I don't know if you could see all that on the video, but when I started pulling on it with the tractor, it broke off down there at the bend where it's been laid over. So I had made a cut there about where that chain is, but I just didn't feel comfortable where I was standing, and I didn't want to get the tractor any closer because I didn't know exactly where that thing was going to fall when it cut. And it wasn't a huge piece, but I was afraid that if I started disturbing it too much, the whole thing would fall over. It just didn't feel good. I felt unsafe, so I backed out of that method and then went with a different approach, which was to get the chain on there. I wasn't even real fond of standing under it to get the chain hooked up to it long enough to just grab the free end, but I got it hooked up, pulled it back, and it didn't give at first, and then when I pulled harder, instead of pulling it down where I had cut it, it pulled the whole tree down. So it is almost on the ground now. It's going to be a lot easier to work with, so I'm just going to start cutting from the end and get that thing cut into pieces and then try to clean this spot up. But I'm very happy that that's on the ground. It has been something that I have wanted to get done for 6 years, and I just didn't know how I was going to go about doing it. Sometimes just jumping into the project is the best way to get it done. So it is it's on the ground mostly now, so I'm gonna get it cut up.